Alright, hello again. This is Jeff Scott, and I have been talking to you about HTML5 and CSS3 courtesy of Murox HTML5 and CSS3 3rd edition. I'm at the end of section 3, which is chapter 17, entitled How to Use jQuery Mobile to Build Mobile Websites. So, as far as what we're trying to do in this chapter, as you can see, use the jQuery mobile features that are presented in the chapter to build a website for mobile devices. Give 2 reasons for creating a separate website for mobile devices rather than converting an existing site to use responsive web design. Explain how a JavaScript plugin can be used by a full website to redirect an HTTP request from a mobile device to a mobile device. Describe the use of the viewport meta element for mobile devices. Explain how testing a mobile website differs from testing a website for computer screens. Describe jQuery Mobile and the 3 files it requires. Describe 2 ways to include the jQuery mobile files in your web pages. In general terms, describe how you use jQuery Mobile to build mobile websites. Describe how these attributes are used by jQuery Mobile. The data role attribute, data transition attribute, data dialog attribute, data rel attribute, data icon attribute, data theme attribute, and class attribute. Finally, describe 2 ways that you can apply the swatches in a theme to the components of a web page when using jQuery Mobile. Alright, so they show here, they start talking about mobile devices here. Alright. There's really 2 ways. We talked about this in an earlier chapter, but you're going to hear it again. There's 2 ways that you can provide web pages for a mobile device. One of those ways, so here is the full site that you'd see on a laptop or desktop, and here's the mobile site. So when you do this, as mentioned here, you can either use a responsive web design, so you can use something like Bootstrap, for example, and use that in conjunction with what are called media queries, so that the pages of the website will work on devices of all sizes, as mentioned, including mobile devices. Or you can develop a separate mobile site. So if the user tries to open the site with a mobile device, they'll immediately be pushed to that site. 2 ways to redirect a user to the mobile version of your site. One, as it says, is to use JavaScript or jQuery to do detection, and once you find out that it's a mobile device, redirect them to the mobile version. Or you can use a server-side scripting language like PHP. Okay. What are the benefits of using a separate website for mobile devices? Typically, rather, it's easier and less expensive to develop a separate mobile website than to re-engineer and add responsive design to an existing site. And the mobile website can be simplified, so if you want, you can only add in there what you want to or think you need to add. Now, as mentioned here, today typically responsive web design is the preferred way to provide web pages for mobile devices. But if you've got a large established site, it might be so time-consuming and expensive to actually change it that you might be better off creating a mobile site. So, this is the home page for Detect Mobile Browsers. Because there are so many different types of mobile devices and mobile browsers, it's difficult to code and maintain a JavaScript application that redirects mobile users to a mobile version of a website. So, to do that, a good way to get started is to look for a plugin. Alright, so one website that provides scripts for detecting browsers is the one that you see on your screen right now. It provides scripts for clients and servers that detect mobile browsers and redirects them to the mobile versions of the sites. Alright, what you see in this figure here, it shows you how to use the JavaScript version of the application. And actually, it's some code that's in here. Let's see if it's shown here. So that's the URL. All right. and as it says, the end of the code in the downloaded file. So that's what they're showing you right here. And you notice on the end there it says mobile. So the way that you use the JavaScript plugin to do this is you go to the URL that's shown here on the top. Then you click on the JavaScript button under the download scripts, heading to a download file named detectmobilebrowserjs.txt. You open the file in your text editor and move the cursor to the end of the JavaScript code. And that'll include a URL like the one that you see above. Then change this URL to the path of the mobile site that you want to be redirected to. Save what you're working on, close the file, and rename so the .txt extension is removed. Then you deploy it on your regular web server. So this website offers many server-side and client-side scripts to help redirect a mobile device from the full version of the site to the mobile version. After you modify the URL in the JavaScript plugin so it points to the current mobile page, you need to provide a script element for it on every page that you want redirected. Pretty much what I just mentioned here. All right, here's a web page on an iPhone. Before you do some scaling and after. So when you develop a website for mobile devices, you can use a special meta tag that's used to configure the device's viewport. All right. We talked about this back in Chapter 8 with responsive web design, but you should also use it if a full website will be displayed on a mobile device, or if you're developing a mobile website with jQuery Mobile. Back in Chapter 8, we talked about the fact that the viewport on a mobile device can be larger or smaller than the visible area on a web page, and it determines how the page content will appear in the area. All right, the basic settings are actually shown right here. Now, when you look at the stuff that's in there, notice, for example, it says content equal width equals device width. And that's the width of the viewport in pixels. If you use the device width keyword, that indicates that the viewport should be as wide as the screen. All right, there's also a height, and the height is the height of the viewport in pixels. You can also use the device height keyword if you want to make it as tall as the screen. There's initial scale, and oftentimes you see that that's the initial zoom factor. There's minimum scale, which indicates the minimum zoom factor, maximum scale for the maximum zoom factor, and user scalable, which indicates whether the user can zoom in and out. Possible values, as you probably guess, are yes and no. So the viewport determines the content that's displayed on the page. It can be larger or smaller than the visible area that's on the screen, and you already saw that, where here it was pretty much smaller or the same size, and there it's larger. If you create web pages specifically for mobile devices, you should try to follow some general guidelines, and they'll be on the next slide or two. And again, I'm going to keep this up there as I go through these, but most of the things that are in here, again, should be common sense to you. First, keep your layout simple so the focus is on the content. One column layouts typically work the best. Second, include only essential content. All right? So if you've got a really intricate images or a really intricate type of logo or whatever, you might not even want to put that on there. Third, keep images small and to a minimum. Fourth, avoid using Flash. Most mobile devices don't support it, and it's especially any Apple product. Fifth, include only the essential navigation in the header of the page. The other navigation should be part of the content for the page. Sixth, make links and other elements large enough that the user can easily manipulate them, especially people with the old fat thumb syndrome. Finally, seventh, use relative measurements so that the page looks good regardless of the scaling. Now those are guidelines for designing. As far as testing, there's 3 more guidelines. Test all pages in as many mobile devices as possible and on as many different browsers in those devices as possible. Next, the best way to test them is to deploy them to your web server and test them on the devices themselves. But if you can't test the pages on the devices themselves, you can use device emulators and browser simulators. Shown on your screen right now is the jQuery mobile website, which, as said, in the book here on page 567, is www.jQueryMobile.com. All right, if you're going to use this, the 2 jQuery libraries that you're going to need are the jQuery library and the jQuery mobile library. jQuery mobile is free, it's open source like jQuery. It's another JavaScript library, but this one is designed to make it easier to develop websites for mobile devices. You use this in combination or in conjunction with jQuery. jQuery mobile lets you store multiple pages in a single HTML file. You can also create dialogues, buttons, nav bars, format pages without coding your own CSS, lay out pages with multiple columns if you want to do that, set up collapsible content blocks and accordions, and there's other things also. jQuery Mobile is supported by most devices, including iOS and Android, plus the other more minor players. The jQuery Mobile website features all the documentation, sample code, and downloads that you need to begin working with mobile devices. Again, to download it, you go to www.jQueryMobile.com. But you don't need to do that if you want to use the CDN that's going to be shown probably on the next page. So in this chapter, you'll learn how to use jQuery Mobile Library to develop a mobile website. It's a very simple site. All right, remember, jQuery Mobile is a free open source cross-platform JavaScript library. To use it, you download the required JavaScript and CSS libraries, deploy them, or you use a CDN. The 3 files that you need to include for jQuery mobile applications are shown at the top here. They are the jQuery JavaScript file, the jQuery mobile JavaScript file, and the jQuery mobile CSS style sheet. The 2 ways that you could include them is to download them and include all the files on your server itself, or you could include the files from a CDN, also known as a content delivery network. Here are CDN examples. jQuery Mobile is constantly being improved and enhanced, so you really should look at the website often because they oftentimes come up with new versions. The file names, the jQuery and jQuery Mobile file names always include the version number. All right. If you download and deploy the jQuery files on the system, you can change the file names to something similar if you're so inclined. So what's shown here is the picture that's on page 571 in the book here. And this is showing the HTML for a typical web page. Actually, it's showing what a typical web page that uses jQuery will look like. It'll have a div, a header, section, and footer elements. There's something that's called a data role attribute, okay, and you can see that right there. That's used to identify the 3 parts of a mobile web page. Again, the page itself, the header, and the footer. The text that's displayed in the header should be coded within an H1 element. The text in the footer should be coded within an H4 element. These are just the standards. The role attribute with a value main is used, all right, to identify the section element that contains the main page content. This section should also be assigned to the UI content class. You can code whatever elements you need to within this class. The style sheet formats the web page based on the values in the data role, and class attributes. So here's two pages that use jQuery Mobile. But before we go over those, I want to show you what actually gets built, what the author actually showed you in this particular chapter. I believe I've got it here. And maybe I don't. No, I don't. Maybe it is off on the other one here. All right, so this is the site, and it doesn't look anything grandiose. It's nothing fantastic. It's real simple. It's one page. But if I take and shrink this down, so this is how it would appear on a mobile device right here. All right, that's as thin as I can make my browser. And this is how it's going to look then on a phone. You'll see that it is responsive, because what we had at first over here, home, speakers, and contact us, now is broken up like this. All right, we still have the title, we still have the speaker, a picture, some other stuff in here, but you can see how nicely it's laid out. That's the example that they develop in this chapter. Okay? So when you use jQuery Mobile, you don't have to develop a separate HTML file for each page. Rather, within the body element of a single HTML file, you can code one div element for each page that you want to put on the site and set its data role attribute to page. For each one of these div elements, you set the ID to a placeholder value that can be accessed by the href attributes in the anchor elements of other pages. If you want to display a page as a dialog, you include the data dialog attribute with the value of true on the div element for the page. To close that, you tap the X in the upper corner. And it's shown really on the next page here, I believe. Over, come on. There we go. Here. What you see right there. All right, so that'll open up the page as a dialog. To specify the way a page or dialog is opened, you can use the data transition attribute. The styling for the dialog is done by the jQuery Mobile CSS file. Now, one thing to realize is, there's way too much stuff in here to remember. Probably if you were going to do this in a class, what you'd want to do would be to go out and Google, mobile website, for example, and take a look at it and just walk through the stuff that's in there. The different transitions that you can use are shown here and on page 575 in the book. Slide is where the next page slides in from right to left. Slide up is when it slides from bottom to top. Slide down is when it slides down from top to bottom. Pop is when the next page fades in from the middle of the screen. Fade is when the next page fades into view, and that's the default. And flip, where the next page flips back to front, similar to like a playing card being flipped over. Some devices don't support flip. And the way you do it, for example, here with the pop transition is shown right here. Sometimes you need more than that. Sometimes you want a mobile page that has different kinds of buttons. Now, this wouldn't be your mobile page, but what the author is showing you here are some of the different kinds of buttons you can actually add to a mobile page. To add a single button, you code an A attribute with its data role attribute set to button. So what's shown here are the icons that are provided for you. All right, you notice there's a delete, there's a home, etc. And you can take a look at the ones that are in here. There are 18 different icons that are provided by jQuery Mobile. They're shown right here. To use them again, you code the data icon attribute and you set the data role to button. All right, there's an example. So this mobile web page with a navigation bar, this is the one that they build throughout the chapter, really pretty much starting on page 578 for the last 15 to 20 pages or so of the chapter. So this figure shows how to add a navigation bar to a header of a web page. To do that, as mentioned here, you code a div element with its data role attribute set to navbar. Within this, you code a UL element that contains the LI elements, which will make up the different items in the navigation bar. You don't code the data role elements for the anchor elements. By default, all of the elements in the navigation bar are displayed in a light gray background and a dark gray type. But if you want, you can assign the UI BTN active class to it and make sure that the one that's assigned, you can give it a different color if you want. And that's what they've done here. There it is in code. They talk here on how to code the HTML for a navigation bar, and that's pretty much what I just went over, okay? Here are some of the default settings for common HTML elements. By default, jQuery automatically applies styles to the HTML elements for a page. Pretty much these styles mimic a browser's native styles. Couple things by default. First, jQuery applies a small amount of padding to the left, right, top, and bottom of each page. Second, links are slightly larger than for normal text, which makes it easier to tap them. Third, links are underlined with blue as the font color. All right, you can see the example that's here. Although you can use your own CSS style sheet for this, you probably should avoid doing it, and the reason for that is typically what you want to do is you want to adhere to the standard, and then that way people who are using your site, it'll look like other sites. The content will be different, but the navigation, etc., and the getting around will be the same. Now, starting on 582, they talk a little bit about themes. So jQuery Mobile includes a default theme that consists of global settings, including the font and the corner radius for buttons and boxes and what are called swatches. The two swatches that come with the default theme define different color combinations for different elements. In general, there's a swatch A, that's the default, which provides a light gray, and a swatch B that provides the dark gray. If you specify a swatch for an element, that swatch is inherited by any child elements. All right. Versions of jQuery Mobile prior to version 1.4 provided 5 different swatches. And what they've done is they've simplified this from 5 to 2. But you can modify the existing swatches, and you can even add new ones. If you want to do that, you use what's called the jQuery Theme Roller application that's available from jQuery Mobile website. All right, to create your own theme. Again, I want to just make sure you understand the fact that you are going to be going over this stuff in the 152, 167 Ajax and JavaScript website development class during the spring semester. Again, some code examples. Here's a mobile web page, as it says, with collapsible content blocks. So if you click the plus sign by Jeffrey Toobin, it'll give Jeffrey Toobin information, etc. Not sure exactly what they were trying to show here, because for speakers, notice how they map up. I'm going to guess that's not Amy Chua right there. It could be Scott Simpson. I don't know. All right. But you see the difference. In the first case, everything is collapsed. So there's a plus sign, meaning that you can click on any one of those. Oh, I guess this is the second one. I should have looked there. That's Andrew Ross Sorkin. In the second case, we've expanded that second block. So to do that, you code a div element for each content block with a data role attribute set to collapsible. By default, then, each content block will be collapsed when the page is displayed. Within each div, you can code an HTML for whatever content you want. You can have more than one collapsible content block expanded at the same time. jQuery automatically adds the pluses and the minuses for these. You can also set up accordions. We've looked at accordions before. All right. So you code the content blocks the same way as you do for collapsible blocks in the previous feature. But a difference between accordions and collapsible content blocks is that jQuery mobile formats the blocks in an accordion as a unit. You can tell this if you compare the example, this example, with the previous one. So in this case, again, with Jeffrey Toobin selected, that's the information about Jeffrey Toobin. Okay. You can create lists if you want to do that. So here's a web page that displays a list using the defaults. In the first example that you see here, the user can tap anywhere on the content block to go to a page that gives more information about that speaker. In the second example, the user can tap on the image or the text to go to the speakers page, or the user can tap on the gear icon for the buy over, on the second example here, if they want to buy tickets to hear that speaker. But you'll notice, other than that, this having the arrows as opposed to having the gearbox, there really isn't too much of a difference between these. Alright, starting on page 590 and going on the next 2, 4, 6 pages of the rest of the chapter, what you're shown here are how the features that we've been working with sets up several pages of a mobile website that uses jQuery Mobile. The idea is that this should give you a better idea of what jQuery Mobile can do for you. So what you see here are 2 of the 4 pages, and here are the other 2. Alright. So when the user taps a speaker on the speakers page, a page for that speaker is open. When they tap a gear on this page, as we already mentioned before, it opens a dialog where the user can buy tickets to hear that speaker. When the user taps on the Contact Us page that you see right here, the phone feature will try to call that number. When you tap the email address, as shown right here, it'll try to start an email for you. So the associated HTML is shown on page 593, and in this slide, and the next one, and the next one. All right. Here's the HTML. That was the HTML for the head section in the home page. Then we get the HTML for the speaker page. Then we're shown the HTML for Scott Sampson's page and for the Contact Us page. So the idea behind going through this chapter is you should at least have a familiarity with jQuery Mobile. Again, what most people still tend to do today is, rather than building their own page, they tend to go in and put in responsive web design to an existing page and add media queries so that basically you'll be able to respond to any size device. But remember, there are 2 ways to do this. You can either create a separate site, so in other words, one for mobile and one for non-mobile, or you can put hooks into an existing site. Now, the idea with a new site today is what you should be doing is thinking mobile first, and code your site for mobile and then let it expand upward, because that's typically much easier to do than to code it for example, for a desktop and have it scale down. And that pretty much, I believe, is it for the chapter. All right, when I come back, we'll continue on.